They cannot be serious with this. The Chicago Bulls ended their 2024-25 season with 39 wins and getting dropped off in the play-in tournament. However, a couple of predictions for this upcoming season have come out, predicting that the Chicago Bulls will suffer the same fate they did last season. Hello, my name is Isaias Jackson Jr. Thank you guys so much for tuning into Bulls Digest. We got to get into all the news and notes into predicting the Chicago Bulls' upcoming season, and of course, seeing if the Chicago Bulls can win a couple more games than what was originally predicted. However, 67.5% of you guys are not subscribed. 32.5% of you guys are. We appreciate you guys on both sides of the field. And look, shout out to everybody that has a nut allergy, a peanut allergy, any type of allergy that you got out there. I'm still dealing with the side effects of mine. You see, the eyes they were swollen. I was a mess. The welts. It was scary. I was looking like a monster out here. And if you have any type of allergy, peanut allergy, hit that subscribe button. Look, we all need some love here. It's a tough time, especially once the seasons change, and of course you got the asthma, the nasal congestion. Ooh, it's rough out here. It's rough out here. So hit the subscribe button, like and share, and thank you guys so much for tuning into Bulls Digest. The win-loss predictions for every team in the 2025-2026 NBA season. First off, of course, not going to go through everybody. Just looking at the Chicago Bulls here. And the Chicago Bulls predicted 38 wins, 44 losses. This right here is coming from Bleacher Report itself. And that is what I've been seeing, or at least from the wide range. Of course, you've seen the articles of Sports Illustrated, and you're seeing ESPN as well. You got the Bulls that's sitting around 37 and 39 wins, coming close to what they did last season, as we talked about with the 39 wins there. So just moving forward, Nikola Vucevic will turn 35 during the first week of the season. Any expected improvements from second-year forward Montes Buzelis, an undeniably exciting prospect, is only going to offset what should be a precipitous Vucevic decline. And that's only if Chicago is lucky. Vooch put up one of his best seasons of his life last year, marked by a career best 61.1 true shooting percentage and the highest free throw attempt rate since he left Orlando a half decade ago. Late career leaps like that are almost never sustainable, and the Bulls have absolutely nothing behind Vucevic on the center depth chart. Now, that's disrespectful. You know, that's a little disrespectful, considering the work that Zach Collins put in there, of course, without asking Zach Collins to consistently start for the Chicago Bulls. But when he did, he played his part. He played his role, and, of course, we have Jalen Smith, a guy that not only did he show that he can hoop in Indiana, now didn't necessarily get the extended minutes in Indiana, is definitely not getting it right now in Chicago, but he can show out when he needs to. Now, I'm not gonna say that these guys are going to be the ones that are going to take over for Vucevic and pick up where Nikola Vucevic left off, but these are guys that can handle themselves on the floor. You know, I'm not just going to say that it's absolutely nothing, behind Nikola Vucevic in the depth chart. But, of course, in fairness, Chicago has a fringe all-star offensive talent in Kobe White. Head coach Billy Donovan instituted an aggressive style that produced the 12th ranked attack last season. Of course, we talked about that with Kobe White, him driving to the basket a whole lot more. Josh Giddey, of course, finding his guys down low in the post as well. Just being an awesome facilitator for what he was for the Chicago Bulls. And, of course, being the three-point threat as well, an offensive threat in himself as well. We talked about Kobe White and Josh Giddey. It's just one or the other is going to have that all-star breakout season this year. And of course, coming from me, I've talked about Kobe White extensively. I've received a whole lot of jokes about Kobe White as well, which, I got to take it on the chin there. But I do think Kobe White, of course, is going to have that all-star caliber season, and we're going to see him represent for the Chicago Bulls this year. Hopefully, at least we're speaking into existence here. If Trey Jones stabilizes the reserves, Josh Giddey manages to sustain his second half gains, and Vooch holds on to another year, the Bulls are going to have an above-average offense. They'll struggle defensively, though, and almost nothing here suggests a ceiling above 42 and 43 wins. See, and that's the thing. I'm not going to be here. I will be here to say that the Chicago Bulls can definitely reach 41, can break even, go 41 and 41 for the season. But even then, 42, 43 wins, I do think is asking a bit much for the Chicago Bulls. Now, of course, the East, you've seen, is still a little depleted. Of course, Boston Celtics took a major hit with their loss of Jason Tatum. The Indiana Pacers took a huge hit in losing Tyrese Halliburton. And so you're seeing, of course, the top teams in the East kind of suffer a little bit in these situations. And, I mean, even in the even in the Bleacher Report, they have the Boston Celtics a game worse than the Chicago Bulls here, which is something I gotta just disagree with just a little bit. But even then, I do think the Chicago Bulls can still maintain some consistency, and it all depends on how you start off the beginning of the season. We talked about the season last year and how they got off to a rough start, and then of course with the Zach LaVine trade, and then of course you see Kobe White step up in a huge way, Josh Giddey as well, Nikola Vucevic, of course, playing lights out at the center position on the offensive side for the Chicago Bulls. I have to throw that down for the offensive side, and then of course just looking at how this season is going to frame out. Now, you're getting some defensive help with Isaac Okoro. Isaac Okoro is coming in. He's going to be the 3-and-D wing that you're going to want for the Chicago Bulls in terms of the starting lineup, looking at the roster, who is going to fit at the three position. You're going to have Isaac Okoro there. And so just looking at the starting five there, which you're assuming is going to be Josh Giddey, Kobe White, Isaac Okoro, Buzelis, and of course Nikola Vucevic for the time being. Nikola Vucevic isn't going to be there for long. And what are you going to get for Nikola Vucevic as well? You still have a decent amount of guys on the trade block as well. Just looking into the bench, Ayo Dosunmu, of course, is in trade talks. Hell, even staying in the starter position, Kobe White, is in trade talks, considering what's going to happen if he's going to resign with the Chicago Bulls, or if he's going to pretty much test his value in free agency and see if the Chicago Bulls are willing to open up their wallets to see if they're going to pay the man, which, as much as I would love for the Chicago Bulls to do so, I think I can definitely see the Chicago Bulls playing a little bit of hardball and losing, Kobe White in the situation. But it just getting ahead of myself here, just staying until the Chicago Bulls season. I still think they're still going to struggle defensively, and then, of course, with the loss of Nikola Vucevic, because if Nikola Vucevic stays, no matter how hot the Chicago Bulls, no matter how hard of a run the Chicago Bulls go on, you still gotta find a way to trade Nikola Vucevic unless you're going to risk just letting him walk, in free agency, which is the last thing you need. You're getting absolutely nothing, from Nikola Vucevic if that is the case. So we're still going off the precipice that Nikola Vucevic is, of course, going to remain dominant on the rebounding side. He is going to stay active down low, and of course, we're going to see a little bit more upside in his 3-point shooting. Now, this, of course, looking at all that, seeing the trade value, seeing the growth, from Nikola Vucevic, seeing teams like, as we talked about before, the Golden State Warriors, certain teams that need a center, seeing what they're going to come out and try to put in a trade package for Nikola Vucevic, and then, of course, how the Chicago Bulls going to bounce back after that. Are they going to hold on to the likes of Ayo Dosunmu? I do think Kobe White is going to play out the rest of the season, but I think trading Kobe White would definitely be I wouldn't say a huge no-no, but I think that'll just be a huge mistake, for the Chicago Bulls in this instance. So just moving on here, of course, after the NBA ushers in a new season, October 21st, with back-to-back games on NBC, the Bulls will begin their campaign at the United Center against a division foe, the improving Detroit Pistons, and they'll head to the South for their first 4 meetings with the retooling Bulls as well. Of course, Chicago will head to Orlando for their first road battle, and 2 days later before returning home for an extended stay. Overall, 4 of the Chicago Bulls' first 5 games will be played on their home court. This comes 1 season after the shockingly finishing with a lower success rate in their old building, of course, in that 18-33, then on the road and 21-20 as well. Now getting into the weeds of the Chicago Bulls schedule, just looking inside, just seeing what the Chicago Bulls have going on. The Chicago Bulls will play 5 mini-series this season, of course, aka 2 straight games against the same opponent. These matchups will come against the Knicks, the Cavaliers, Hawks, Heat, and Wizards. Interestingly enough, the series against the Cavaliers and Hawks will be back-to-back. Sucks in itself. And of course, we seen the Atlanta Hawks, they have them on the rise. You see Jalen Johnson, and of course they have him, of the great upside that he has. It's just a matter of him staying healthy. And of course, the same thing with Dyson Daniels as well. They have a lot of guys, a lot of young talent on that team, and Trae Young, of course, being the centerfold for that team. The Atlanta Hawks can definitely be a team on the rise. I just still haven't been 100% sold on them this yet, so I'm definitely keeping my expectations just a little low for the Atlanta Hawks. Of course, you have the New York Knicks, who are still going to remain a top 3 team in the East, as well as the Cavaliers. Of course, you have the Miami Heat projected to win 42 games as well. And the Miami Heat always have the back and forth with the Chicago Bulls. The Chicago Bulls and the Miami Heat definitely, the Chicago Bulls can't get the edge over the Miami Heat. And even in the play-in, you just seen the Chicago Bulls just lack energy, in that last game. And of course, you've seen the likes of, Bam Adebayo and Tyler Hero, just talking about on the course of not only the series, but in the play-in tournament as well, go off and show out for the Miami Heat as well. Now, can the Chicago Bulls come out and have a hot enough start to ride the waves and pretty much come close to a 40-41 win season? I definitely believe so. And I mean, matter of fact, if I could just skip all the way through, because we do have the schedule right here, because they do start off in Detroit, which is definitely going to be a rough one. Detroit, of course, being on the rise. I believe Cade Cunningham finished like 6th or 7th in MVP voting last year. So Detroit, of course, nothing to mess with there. And of course, they have a really, really decent center that's on the rise in Jalen Duren, somebody I would definitely love to have for the Chicago Bulls. I don't see that happening, but Jalen Duren is definitely a tough centerpiece at that center position for the Detroit Pistons. And then of course you move on to Orlando. You go over to Orlando to face on the Magic, a tough matchup in itself with the addition of Desmond Bane as well. I believe they have Tyus Jones too. Team is looking really, really sharp. They're putting the pieces together. Orlando Magic is going to be scary, going into this season. And then, of course, you have the Atlanta Hawks, Sacramento Kings, a back-to-back with New York. And then you have Philadelphia, Milwaukee, and Cleveland. And then, of course, you finish off in San Antonio at home before you get to Detroit again. So I do think that's a really, really tough stretch, to battle with. If you're the Chicago Bulls, you can easily, and I'm not speaking this into existence here, you can easily start off the season 1-6, 1-7, when dealing with the likes of the Detroit Pistons, of course, the New York Knicks. You don't know what you're going to get from the Atlanta Hawks, and I have zero faith. I think it's when you get to Philadelphia, and of course, when you get to the likes of San Antonio, Utah, is when things start getting a little bit smoother. Portland, Miami, Washington, Charlotte, New Orleans, Indiana. And so I do think there's a fair shot that the Chicago Bulls can come out looking a whole lot better than what they did last season. Coming out and overperform. If they get to the hot start that we've been expecting, if they continue on with that attack offense that we talked about a little bit earlier in Billy Donovan's strategy and game plan, then the Chicago Bulls can really look nice here. And it's just a matter of how are they going to adapt and how are they going to work with the restructuring of the roster once they make the moves before the trade deadline, and of course the pieces that are going to come out of that as well. And then getting after the All-Star game, getting after the All-Star break, are the Chicago Bulls going to go on that amazing run that we saw last season? Now, of course, we're not going to stay in that fever dream forever. Of course, like that was last season. We're looking at a whole nother season, and I'm expecting at least a flip around. I'm expecting at least the Chicago Bulls to go off on a really, really hot start in the beginning of the season and then kind of simmer down once the All-Star break happens, because of course you're going to get the restructuring of the roster. We trying to figure out who is going to be on the team still, when it's all said and done. And then of course, what's the starting lineup going to look like, after the All-Star break? Who is going to remain healthy in these situations as well? And is Kobe White going to play lights out, for this contract that he's going to be getting in this upcoming free agency? Is Josh Giddey going to live up to this 4-year, $100 million contract in his first year? Of course, those are the questions that we need to ask. But even in terms of the roster and the structure of the roster, it's still a solid team, and you have some solid pieces. I do think there is a foundation, there for the Chicago Bulls. And so 38, 39 wins, I do think that they will be a little bit better. Even Montes Buzelis coming out and saying that he wants to win Most Improved Player of the Year, and he hooped out and he balled out in his rookie year. So it's just a matter of seeing how that sophomore leap, was going to look like for him. And of course, still got to look at the guys on the bench like the Patrick Williams. Are we going to watch the performance of Patrick Williams? Are we going to see him come out and be a little bit more aggressive than we ever seen him be? Trey Jones, we've already seen him I won't go as far as say as amazing things. It's not like he was pretty much doing 360 windmills. He held his own, and he was a solid player for the Chicago Bulls when Josh Giddey went down. And then of course, even when Josh Giddey came back, he still picked up the pace coming off the bench at the point guard position. So you got to have a whole lot of love for that. Kevin Huerter picked up the pace, at the tail end of the season. How is he going to look, once we get off this full stretch with the Chicago Bulls? So a whole lot of question marks, but I fully believe that the Chicago Bulls can still eke out 41 wins, this season and still break even, because we talked about, I still have zero faith in Philadelphia. They're literally always an injury away. And I'm not even trying to, and I know that's disrespectful. I don't want to put injuries out there in the world, but that's history shows it. And so, no faith in Philadelphia. I mean, you got to give it up to Milwaukee. They're putting together the pieces, the Kyle Kuzmas, the Miles Turners. They're bringing them all in. But the loss of course, Damian Lillard as well. I don't have a huge amount of faith that the Milwaukee Bucks are going to be dominant this season, but I do think they'll hold their own. And of course, with a superstar like Giannis Antetokounmpo, it's still going to be hard to contain. I do think it'll still be a back and forth battle with Chicago, but it's not going to be an absolute slaughter. Or I don't think the Chicago Bulls are just going to go off wavering against the Milwaukee Bucks and coming up a little short in that instance. And so I still have a lot of hope and a lot of faith that the Chicago Bulls could still do some damage early on into the season. It does look like a rough start with those first 6 games, but honestly, after you get through that storm that you have there, I do think the Chicago Bulls are looking really, really nice, and I see them going at least 40 to 41 wins. But what do you think? Do you see the Chicago Bulls staying at that 37 to 39 wins this season, or do you have the Chicago Bulls winning that 40, 41? Or, I mean, are you just as insane as everybody else? Are you just as insane as or do you just have a stronger opinion than everybody else? And do you believe that the Chicago Bulls could reach that 42-43 win season this year? Thank you guys so much for tuning in, and I'll see you guys next time.